Hello, I'm Dr. William Thomas. I'm a leadership coach with Designing Leaders in Singapore, and I'm very happy that you are all able to join the session today. Our webinar today on building resilience for recovery is scheduled to run about 45 minutes. I've got about 35 minutes of material to share with you, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. Now, you can send me questions in the chat box. As we go along, I may take some of those or I may hold them for the end. One other thing that I would suggest is that if you see some questions pop up and you've got some ideas about them, by all means, share your answers, share your thoughts. I think we learn a lot more when we learn from each other rather than just trying to learn from me. Our subject today is all about building up your organization's resilience. And the idea of resilience has been getting a lot of interest in business for the last few years. I've been giving talks on resilience based on my marathon running experiences since 2017. And it's taking on greater importance, I would argue, during the pandemic situation, because just like with the global financial crisis a decade ago, our economies have all taken a big hit. And it's going to take some time to recover from that. Now, that recovery is going to be filled with challenges and obstacles, as well as new opportunities. So your organization is going to need the strength to navigate through that uncertainty and keep moving forward. Now, that does not just happen naturally. We're not just naturally resilient. Certainly our organizations typically aren't. And let me give you an example of another situation where people did not prepare very well for a recovery. So before I became a leadership coach, I spent a career as an officer in the United States Air Force. And if you recall, in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein's government. In 2004 and 2005, I was there as a strategic planner involved in the recovery effort. In my case, I was working on rebuilding the Iraqi army and the police so that the government could provide security for their people. Now, prior to the invasion of Iraq, a lot of thought was given to planning for combat, but relatively little thought was given to the post-combat recovery. Senior political leaders said things like, we'll be welcomed with sweets and flowers. We're going to hold elections within 90 days. It's going to be like the Allies marching into Paris in World War II. And there was certainly a lot of optimism, but there was not a lot of useful preparation. So I was there in 2005 to help get things settled so that the US could leave and let the Iraqis run their own country. Fast forward to January of this year, when 200,000 Iraqis took to the streets of Baghdad to protest the continuing US military presence in their country. 15 years later, there's still a US military mission there. The recovery effort did not go very smoothly. And some colleagues and I wrote a book about our experiences there, and there were a couple of things that really jumped out at us. First, many leaders assumed that combat would be hard, but recovery would be easy. And there was, as a result, there was little thought given to the obstacles and the challenges that would emerge and to what it would take to get over those. And so the capabilities to move past those challenges were never developed. And I'm not just talking about throwing money at the problem. I mean, having the skills and the knowledge and the organizational structures that we needed. Those were in very short supply. I have similar concerns today when I hear people say that the hard part of the pandemic is almost over. Let me, if I could, let me put up a quick poll. I'd like to get an idea of how your companies are thinking about the future. And if you look at these three statements, which one do you think best describes what your company is going through right now? As you take a look at these statements here, what do you think describes your company's situation? How do you think your organization is doing right now? Do you feel like you're planning well for the recovery? Do you hope that you're planning for the recovery, or are you just trying to survive right now? Okay, a lot of interesting answers there. It's an interesting split, I think, and a little different from what I expected. So that's actually good to see. I'm a little bit more optimistic now, having seen some of the results of this poll. So I'll close that out. And yeah, very interesting, very interesting. Okay, so a lot of folks feel like they're making some effort on their planning, which is fantastic. Others are concerned that maybe somebody's doing it, but they don't know who. And there are a few folks that are a little worried that they're focusing on survival. They're not really worried about the future yet. Obviously, you need to survive in the short term in order to survive in the long term. But experience has shown that a recovery path is going to be very uncertain. And a lot of effort needs to be going into that now to get ready for that. So as you're focused on survival today, you want to have at least one eye on the future. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So in return for your investment of 45 minutes today, here's the return that I'd like you to get. Okay. I'd like you to be able to come out of this able to start or improve your planning for what's coming. Now, obviously, you can't know everything that's going to happen, but there are some questions that you should be asking that will reduce your uncertainty, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Next, I want you to be thinking about how you're going to have the people that you need. Okay. And how you're going to get the full value of those people, what it's going to take to get the full value of your workforce. And then finally, I want you to be able to start capturing lessons learned from the current situation so that you can decide how to adapt your working methods going forward. All of these are important for building resilience throughout your organization. Now, I keep throwing out that word resilience, and as we talk about it today, I want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So let me offer a definition for our discussion today. Think of resilience as this, as the ability to have a goal out in front of you and keep moving toward that goal despite all the uncertainty and all the changes that come up along the way. Resilience is that inner strength that lets you look for a solution rather than letting a problem beat you and make you give up. Resilience is the willingness to change course and try something new to get you to your destination. Now, when we talk about resilience, we often talk about it in the context of sports. But resilience is something that's really suited to any long-term goal. It could be expanding your business into a new market, which is going to take a lot of effort. It could be earning a PhD. It could be learning a new language or raising a family. Resilience is what helps us keep going until we're successful. So let's talk just a little bit about why that matters in the context of the current situation. First, we do need to overcome the challenges that we face today. You need to survive in the short term if you're going to survive in the long term. And as Oliver mentions here in the chat box, things may be a little touch and go right now. And they are for a lot of organizations. So if you feel like you're worried day to day about what's going to happen to your business, you certainly are not alone. So we need to be able to work through our current challenges and get to the recovery period. And then we need to realize that there is going to be a lot of uncertainty ahead of us, and we need to be adaptable enough to move in different directions when needed. This is not going to be like flipping a light switch when restrictions are lifted in our cities and we go back to normal. The International Monetary Fund has said that worldwide economic growth is likely to drop about 3% this year. And it may be 2022 before we can truly recover from this situation. There could be another wave of infections this winter. We have no realistic idea when a vaccine is going to be created. And even once it is, we don't know how long it's going to take to get it distributed globally. A lot of things are going to happen in the next couple of years, and we do not have all the details. So resilience is necessary for dealing with that uncertainty that's out there ahead of us. Now, of course, organizations don't want to just survive. If possible, they want to grow. And you may have opportunities for that. Your market may be going through changes that create opportunities for you. And you need to be on the lookout for those. And if you don't believe me, just talk to the folks at Zoom. And I think they would agree that opportunities for growth can occur even in bad times. Like a sports team, you need to play defense to stay alive, but you need to play offense to win. So you need to be able to look for those opportunities to continue to grow. And finally, you don't want to get so overwhelmed by your challenges that you focus only on what's happening internally. You need to maintain your external relationships, not only with customers, but also with your suppliers, with your vendors. In challenging times, people are more likely to stick with those that they know and trust. So don't assume that you can just forget about these relationships now and then pick them up again later. Your customers may find somebody else to help them in the meantime, and that would be who they'd stick with. So try to focus on maintaining your external relationships is imperative as you go forward. Now, all of this is going to need to be done for an extended period of time. Okay, like I said, this is not going to be like flipping a light switch. This is a long challenge, and we don't even see the finish line yet. We're not sure what the finish line looks for. So being resilient is going to be essential for your organization's survival. And there are 3 key areas that you can focus on to build your organization's strength. And that's what we're going to address today. So we're going to look at planning. Are you anticipating what's coming so that you're not caught by surprise? Are you planning to make sure you have the resources necessary to move in different directions and use different options as things change? What about your people? Will you have the people that you need? Will they have the skills and the knowledge that you need in order to get through the uncertain environment ahead? And finally, how are you going to work going forward? What kind of processes are you going to use? Have you learned anything during the pandemic that's going to change your company's way of working as you go forward? Now, you might be a senior leader in your company setting the strategy for the whole organization, or you could be a supervisor in your very first management role. But whether you're leading a company or leading a small team, you need to be asking some questions. You need to be getting the people who are looking to you need your help in getting stronger. So let's start by looking at some questions that you might ask as part of your planning. And these are the areas that I want to highlight today. First, you need to try and figure out what your market is going to look like, how your product fits into consumer demand, and what's going on with your competition. In particular, you're going to want to evaluate your relationships with your customers and your suppliers. And finally, you're going to need to give some thought to getting your employees to that new normal workplace, whether that involves reopening your offices or something else. So let's dig down into each of these for a moment and start by looking at how your competitive market is changing. Ask yourself, what is happening to your customers? How are they being impacted by events? This is going to be an important thing for you to know, because the factors that impact them are going to impact you. For example, a linen supply company that services hotels is obviously affected by the business at that hotel. And business at hotels is affected by travel restrictions for people coming into the country. So you need to figure out how your customers are being affected so you understand the factors that would ultimately affect you, and then use that information for your own planning. So if you're that linen supply company and you know that your hotels are losing business because of travel limitations, then maybe you try to shift your focus somewhere else. But if you know that those hotels are actually becoming quarantine centers, then maybe you have to change your own internal processes to upgrade the cleaning and the hygiene requirements. So look at what's affecting your customers, and that'll help you figure out what's affecting you. Look at your competitors as well. What's happening with your competition? Are they even still in business? If they are, have they cut their workforce? Have they cut their capacity? Are they pivoting to other products? Are they focusing on other areas and maybe getting out of your market? As customer demand does pick up over time, there may be reduced supply because some of your competition may not be there anymore. And that could be a gap that you could fill. But you only know that if you go out and do the research. Finally, take a look at how your product fit into the pandemic situation and how that may change as the markets change going forward. For example, think about different parts of the travel industry. Airlines, of course, have taken a huge hit as very little travel is going on, and they're going to have to rebuild. Hotels have also been hit hard for the same reasons, but in some cases, as I mentioned before, they've been able to contract out as quarantine facilities. So they're going to have to pivot. The hotels are going to have to pivot back from being a quarantine site to serving travelers. The thing is, understand where you are right now, understand what your business is right now, and realize that may be different in the future. You may have to change your direction in the future. So try and set some expectations now, okay? Try to understand where you are now, but also figure out where you expect to be in the future so that you can find the right path to get you there. You need to be able to adjust your business objectives and your business planning to meet expected market conditions. And to do that, you need to know what those conditions are. So you need to be gathering information about your market to help you make more informed decisions. Now, a lot of that information is going to come from your relationships with people outside of your company. So stay connected with your customers. Even if they're not buying or if you're not selling right now, don't let relationships die. It could be something as simple as just calling them and catching up. It could be regular emails that you push out or newsletters. It could be some small free services that you provide, like providing monthly webinars for free. But in any case, make an effort to stay engaged with your customers. And the same goes for your vendors and your suppliers. Even if you've reduced your operations, and so you're buying less from your vendors, stay connected with them. You don't want to be restarting relationships or creating new relationships with somebody new, because that's just going to slow things down. You're going to waste time, and your own recovery is going to go a lot more slowly if you have to create or recreate relationships and networks. So hold on to what you've got. Now, as you stay connected with your customers and your suppliers, you can learn about how they are impacted and what their plans are. Try to get an idea of when your customers are going to start buying again. Make sure you understand how your supply chain has been affected, how all those vendors that you rely on have been affected. This gives you a better idea of the market's potential for recovery, and it helps you come up with better plans. And as you're coming up with plans and as you're talking with outsiders about their plans, try to be open about your own. Obviously, people are going to be more transparent with you if you're more transparent with them. So share your plans with them. Try not to keep too many secrets from the people that you need to be working with in order to recover. Making the effort to keep your relationships going can have a huge payoff. You will have a much smoother recovery if you're able to use existing relationships rather than starting over. Now, of course, in addition to looking outside, you need to look inside. And so the last piece of planning I want to touch on is your workplace. You need to figure out what your workplace is going to look like. For example, you're going to have to find the right balance between working at the office versus working from home. For example, Twitter recently announced a new policy that employees can work from home permanently if they choose to. The tech companies were one of the first that went to working from home this year, and they may be among the last that go back to the offices. Your response may not be quite so extreme, but realize that your employees may have a voice in this too. Last month in Singapore, there was a government-sponsored survey that found that 80% of the respondents said that they would prefer to continue working at home at least part-time, even though many of them feel less productive working from home. So you're going to need to rethink the purpose of your office. You're going to need to rethink what you really need it for and how you should use it, and then come up with plans for where your people should work and when they should work in those different places. Okay? You're not just going to automatically go back to the office. And when it comes to returning to the office, assuming that you do reopen your offices and plan to bring people back in, keep in mind that a lot of your employees may be nervous about coming back. There was a poll in the United States that was released this month, showing that a majority of Americans who work in offices hesitate to return, and 25% of them said they absolutely will not go back to the office until they feel safe. Now, the numbers may be different in your country, but you will have plenty of people who are concerned about contracting a virus at work and bringing it home. The consulting firm Gartner has done some work on this, and they published some work that encourages reopening your offices in phases. And they recommend having your leadership team return first to help others feel confident about their own return later. You also need to consider rearranging the office layout to accommodate social distancing, thinking about things like having hand sanitizer on hand or what the rules for the pantry are going to be, and so on. Here in Singapore, some offices can start reopening next month, but they have to have plans in place for employee safety. Start working on those now, if you haven't already, to improve your employees' health and also their confidence. And finally, communicate your plans to your employees, not just about the workplace, but about the business overall. Don't make them wonder what's going to happen. Don't create uncertainty when you don't need to. Don't let them worry about the unknown. Okay, so be open and transparent about your plans with your employees. Your goal is to have employees who are engaged in their work and confident about their leadership. In fact, your employees are going to be the real key to your recovery. So let's spend some time talking about them and how to get the most value out of your people. Having the right people with the right skills and knowledge that you need for recovery is absolutely essential. So we're going to take a look here at how you can try to keep your employees, how you can develop their skills now, and how you might find the best way to use them based not just on your ideas, but on theirs. So let's first consider the challenge of trying to keep your people. The first point I want to make here is that you should try to avoid retrenchments and layoffs and hold on to your people. Now, this is proving to be a real challenge for a lot of companies, so let's take a moment to look at it. When you lay off your employees, when you let people go, you're losing valuable institutional knowledge. It's not just a matter of their skill sets. It's also their understanding of your company and their understanding of your market and their networks and their relationships that you're losing. If you cut people now and then try to hire new people later as you recover, you're going to have a less capable workforce and your recovery is going to be harder. Those new people that you hire later on, after the layoffs, well, they are likely to have less loyalty to you since you have demonstrated that you are willing to cut people. And that reduced loyalty often leads to lower engagement and lower performance. Let me give you an example that just popped up recently. A small consulting firm in the oil and gas industry here in Singapore recently cut part of its workforce. On one team of 8 people, they cut 5 of them, just on a moment's notice. The oil and gas sector has had some extra challenges lately. So you might think it makes sense for them to let people go. But how are they going to recover when things turn up again, when they have less than half the people that they had before? Who's going to do the work? Where's the expertise? And if you think they'll just hire more people, consider the damage that they've done to their employment brand, first of all. You know, high performers may hesitate to join a company that was so willing to cut people. Also, there may not be people out there waiting to be hired. You may think that unemployment is going to rise and there are going to be a lot of people looking for work. But a report in the Business Times here in Singapore just this week shared that tech talent, for example, remains in very high demand, and a lot of people are still hiring right now. So if, you know, it depends on obviously what kind of employees you're going to be looking for later, but if you assume there's going to be a big pool of unemployed workers, you may be very disappointed. And you may have trouble hiring people later on if you let people go now. Now, obviously, you may reach a point where the only way you can stay in business is to cut people. And if you're at that point, then you got to do what you got to do. But let that be your last resort. Okay, you really need to take a long-term view here. So try instead to reduce the cost of your workforce if you can. I can almost guarantee you that your employees would rather keep their jobs in exchange for a 4-day work week and a 20% pay cut, or a temporary reduction in benefits. Okay? Try to cut the cost of your workforce before you actually cut the workforce. Now, with that point in mind, let me suggest that you You need to be ready to restore those benefits when things get better. During the Great Recession, there were a lot of companies that asked their employees to make a temporary sacrifice. Unfortunately, as things improved, a lot of those companies forgot about reinstating pay and benefits that people thought they were only giving up temporarily. You will lose people in the recovery if you do that. So as things get better, start restoring any cuts that you've made. Now, as you keep your people, you want to make sure that you can get a lot of business value out of their work. So they need to be ready to go. And in order to overcome the challenges facing you, you need a workforce that is prepared to grow in an uncertain environment. Now, a lot of companies are cutting their training and their development programs. Obviously, we've seen this before. When companies need to cut costs, first thing they do is they cut their training budget, right? But you don't want to weaken your skills right when you really, really need to be strong. So if your workload has decreased, consider how you can use that downtime for development. All too often in normal conditions, leaders say, I'd love to be able to send my people for training, but we just don't have the time. Okay, well, now maybe you do. Don't waste this opportunity to develop skills, okay? Don't waste this opportunity to expand people's perspectives so that they can be more creative in their problem solving in the months ahead. This could be your chance to improve the hard skills and the soft skills that your workforce is going to need. Now, of course, if revenue is down, you're probably trying to reduce your cost, right? And that means you may need to look for online programs and other low-cost options. So if you work with trainers who normally teach in person, and now they're doing it online, maybe you can negotiate a lower cost. Of course, it pains me to say it as a trainer myself, but there are other options such as LinkedIn Learning and Coursera that could offer classes at a lower cost than contracting with somebody like me. You could also look for other opportunities out there. Maybe have your employees training each other, but look for opportunities to keep the development going. Okay, use this time. Now, you may want to consider, if you're not able to do large-scale training, you may still want to consider individual coaching for your rising leaders. And the reason is that even though you aren't able to hold workshops and training seminars the way you used to, your leadership pipeline is still flowing. People are still getting promoted, people are still moving into new roles, and they need to be ready for those. So if you can't do your typical group development programs, at least consider individual programs for people who could use it the most. Now, when you have all of these trained and skilled people, you want to put them to good use. And consider that the way you want to put them to use may have changed. And the best place to get ideas of how that's changed may be from your employees themselves, okay? So you want your employees to be as effective as possible, to be as high performing as possible. And very often they are the ones who are in a position to know what works best. So make use of that. And you'll also find, by the way, that when people have more of a say in how their work gets done, they tend to be more engaged in it. And higher engagement typically leads to higher job performance. So a top-down style of leadership it may seem faster, like I'm just going to give orders and you're going to do it. But remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. It's not speed that matters, it's endurance. It's performance over the long run. And a bottom-up approach can help you find the best ways to keep working. So ask your team, what has been working and what should we continue doing? Are there things that you started doing during the pandemic that worked well and that you should continue doing? If something's efficient now, can it continue to be efficient? Make use of it. Are there things you started doing that you need to stop doing? Are there practices you put in place that you need to drop? Were there things that were okay temporarily, but if you make them permanent, that's going to be a problem? If there are things that your employees have been tolerating, but they want to see them change, you need to know that. And finally, are there things that you did before the pandemic that you should not go back to? If there are things that you stopped doing and there was no negative impact, maybe there's no reason to start doing them again. The processes that look good from a leader's position often have a different impact at the employee level. So rather than deciding for yourself how things need to be, try reaching out to your employees and get their insights. With that in mind, let's take a look at the final area for consideration, which is reviewing your own processes and finding what works best. You've had a lot of opportunities to learn about different ways of working during the pandemic, and don't Don't let that learning go to waste, okay? At least get something positive out of this. The consulting firm Deloitte has put together some strategy guidance for the transition from this crisis period we have been in into the new normal working environment. Now, some of the top priorities that they identify include figuring out the right workforce structure for your organization, figuring out what skills are needed, and figuring out how you should be providing support to your employees. So with that in mind, let's consider these 3 areas where you should be asking questions to give you an idea of what your working environment is going to look like, or what it should look like going forward. And once you ask questions about these and have an idea of what the future should look like, then you can start working towards that. So first of all, let's look at how your employees are going to work. And, the folks at Deloitte made the point that whatever your organizational structure is going to be, it's probably not going to be the same as what it was. So look at the way that your people work together to get things done and see what you can learn from the way that you've been organized lately. And there are 3 elements of working here that I want to touch on. You may have others that you need to focus on. But these are 3 of the basics. First, what have you learned about virtual teams? For a long time, businesses struggled with having team members and employees and managers working in different locations. But for a few months, that's all we've done. So what have you learned about how to effectively communicate and collaborate and innovate with people in other places? You were forced to do it, so are you doing it any better? And how do you want to do it going forward? Along those lines, do you feel like the need for managers' oversight has changed? Is there more trust within the company now than maybe there was before? And how can you use that if there is? One reason that people really resisted, that companies resisted working from home before, was that you had managers who said, if I can't see my people working, how do I know they're working? And after a few months of trying it out, what's the result? What have you found? What have you learned? Finally, this is one I think we all would love to take a hard look at. Did you cut back on meetings? And if so, was there a negative impact? Or did you replace all your in-person meetings with online meetings? And maybe you tried running them differently. Were there new techniques for meetings that you found to be really, really helpful? As Antonio says, they realized that a lot of those meetings could have been done by emails. Well, in his case, all those meetings could have been done by emails. But for those who continued having meetings, did you try doing anything differently, like sending an agenda around in advance? What a shocking idea that would be. Or limiting the amount of time that people would talk, or requiring data rather than just opinions. Were there any techniques you tried for your meetings that actually were pretty useful? So take a look at how you've been working and what working styles have been effective and what haven't, and see how that's going to change your working style going forward. Now, realize that some of the external processes and the external relationships may need to change as well. Do you still need in-person meetings with all of your clients, or are you finding virtual meetings to work just as well? The real estate industry has continued to sell properties using virtual open houses and virtual tours of properties. So people have been buying homes that they haven't even visited. If it's working for them, can you incorporate some of their practices into your own work with your own clients? Next, ask yourself, what kind of effort do you really need to make in order to make sales? A leader from the pharmaceutical industry shared an interesting thought with me. They said, we're not sending salespeople out to doctors, but doctors are still buying and using our drugs. And it makes you wonder how much those salespeople really need to go back to doctors. Take a look at your sales and consider that maybe you should shift your effort. You should reallocate your effort. Maybe focus your sales on the new products and spend less time worrying about stuff that customers are going to buy anyway. And with that in mind, look at your structure for maintaining your customer relationships. Based on your recent experiences, what kind of touch points do your customers really need in order to stay engaged with you? If you've cut back on your contact with them, or if you have fewer people reaching out to your clients than we're doing it before, what should you learn from that? I've had a chief HR officer tell me that they had multiple contacts at one particular consulting firm because they had multiple programs that they did with them. And what they said was that they really wanted just one point of contact. Well, during the pandemic, that's what they've had. and they want that to continue. So take a look at your recent experiences and how you interact with your customers and your clients, and see what that's taught you about how your customers might want to stay connected with you. And finally, take a look at how you work with each other, how you might innovate better and be more flexible by helping your business functions work better together. What have you learned about how your different functions and your different business units can share information and support each other? So, for example, what technology did you find was useful for meetings and conversations and information sharing? Some companies started using Zoom right away, and then there were some security problems, and then they went to other platforms, and others stuck with Zoom. Meanwhile, new platforms popped up. What worked for you? What features were important? Which features didn't matter? And then this would be useful to figure out, to pick a platform and go forward with it and stay comfortable with it. Because as Oliver points out here, in-person meetings may become a luxury, whether with your clients or with even internally. And it's better to find the technology that's really going to work, okay? So pay close attention to the tech that you used and figure out what really, really works for you. Next, what new relationships and networks emerged within the company that were useful? Who did your employees start working with that they hadn't been working with before? A lot of companies used project teams to address specific issues related to the pandemic. Can those relationships continue to be useful? And how can you maintain them? And finally, did you automate or streamline any processes that you should continue doing in this new automated and streamlined way? Any digitalization that you did that proved useful? The Singapore government started pushing its e-invoice program recently. It's designed to replace paper invoices being given to customers or being even emailed to customers. It's a centralized system for invoicing your clients. They were so enthusiastic about it that they gave companies a $200 grant just for signing up. Okay, this is an interesting streamlining measure that the government has rolled out. What about you? What have you found to be helpful internally when it comes to streamlining or digitizing different processes? And how can that make you more efficient going forward? One piece of tech here that Antonio points out. Yeah, apparently being able to change your background on camera is a very important feature. I'm kind of thinking it takes up a lot of your computer memory, but more power to you if you want to put the moons of Jupiter behind you. But that's a thing. There's been tech that's been fun to use, but what is it that's been really useful? And that's what I want you to really, really take a hard look at. Okay. So these are the key themes that I want you to be focusing on, and asking questions, asking some really detailed questions can help you achieve each of these themes that we've talked about. We want you to be proactive, not just sitting around waiting to react. We want you to make sure that your people are ready for what's coming. And as Kyo said, this is the time to build competencies to make sure that your employees are relevant when they get back to the new normal. So don't lose all the lessons that you've learned. You had an amazing learning opportunity for these last couple of months, and it's going to continue. Make sure you collect those lessons, okay? Okay, there's a long, long path ahead without a clearly defined finish line. Frankly, you're going to have to define that finish line yourself. Now, today's session is just giving you an introduction to what it's going to take to build the resilience that you need for recovery. But even with just the basics, even with just what little bit we've discussed here, there are some things that you can get started on right away. So before we close out today, I want to offer some steps that you could take immediately, and then we'll have a few minutes where I can hopefully take some questions from you. And you can start putting those in the chat box now if you would like to. But here are some things that I encourage you to do. Start doing them as soon as the session is over. I mean, don't wait, just start doing them this afternoon, okay? First, make sure that somebody is responsible for recovery planning. Now, if you're a CEO, maybe you have a strategy department that's working on that, or maybe you've got a team that you've put together to help you out. If you're the supervisor of a team, maybe it's you who's going to be doing the planning for your team. But somebody needs to be responsible for looking ahead. So identify somebody now if you haven't already. Okay, identify somebody now if you haven't done that. Let that be the first thing that you do. Figure out who's responsible. Next, take a look at your workforce planning. Take a look at your strategic workforce plan and identify who you really need to keep and what's going to be necessary to keep them. Consider everything. Consider the government support you may be getting. Consider the opportunity to cut other costs around the company before you cut your people, and then figure out what you might need to do with your employees in order to keep them. Do you have to go to unpaid leave? Do you have to cut salaries? Do you have to cut the work week? Folks, you're going to have a very hard time recovering without people who know what they're doing. So try really hard. And one of the first things you can do is look at your workforce plan and figure out who you need to hold on to and how you can hold on to them. To help those people that you hold on to, identify opportunities for development, not just for your employees, but also for yourself, okay? Use this time to build your own competencies as well. Maybe it's working with a trainer to teach an online class. Maybe it's using the free or the low-cost public options like LinkedIn. Maybe it's having an executive coach come in. Look for those training methods now, okay? Don't wait on this. Don't fall behind on your development. And finally, start talking with your people about the policies and processes that should be continued. You don't want to throw away good ideas. You don't want to stop doing something that's working. So as cities begin opening up and things start changing, take the time now to figure out what you should keep doing. Now, these are all things that you could be doing in the next couple of days, and I strongly encourage you to start taking those actions soon, okay? If you wait and wait and wait, you may never get around to doing it, okay? Now, if you would like to take more action, I'm going to share a file here that describes an online event that we can run with your company to help you get started on your planning, or to actually get down into the details and go through the planning with you, depending on what you need. So please feel free to go ahead and download that, and we can send that out to you again later. Now, we've got a few minutes left for some questions. And if you want to go ahead and send those over, please do. But I do want to point out a couple of things. If you've got any questions about our programs, would like to learn more about what we offer, there's our website there, designingsleaders.com. If you'd like to connect up with me, please just search for William Thomas, PhD on LinkedIn. That would be me. I'd love to connect up with you. And you're going to get an email after the session today with some information, and also asking for your feedback on the session. And we pay very close attention to that. I've made some specific changes to this program based on feedback from last month. We would also ask you on there about any topics you have in mind for future sessions. So we'd love to hear what you think. Okay. Okay. So looking at a few comments that folks have shared here, and I think there's some valuable ideas that all of you are offering up, and I hope everybody will take these away. Kyo says that data analytics has been key to providing the sales force with the insights they need, and yeah, that's very true. Take a look at the data. Take a look at how your sales have been affected and how your interaction with clients has changed, and see what that tells you about maybe what your sales organization should be like and what your sales methodology should be. Janet says it's all about the right attitude. Leaders need to consider the most important thing, and really who is responsible. And that is something, that question of responsibility is something I hope you will all take to heart. In a large company, it's really easy to say, I'm sure somebody's taking care of this. If you don't know who's taking care of this, it's very possible that nobody is. So don't be afraid to ask. In a small company, it may be a little more obvious, but in a large organization, it's fine to ask the question, who's responsible for planning for the future? And if nobody is, and if nobody's stepping up, folks, take it. Take that responsibility and run with it, okay? Sandeep suggests working from home should be the new normal. I can tell you, with my company, that's the way we're probably going to have to do it for a while. And we'd like to be able to get back in and work in person, but it's going to be tricky. So what we're probably going to end up doing is working from home, and then maybe coming together in person once a week at our office space, and hashing out what needs to be hashed out in person. Because you do lose a lot when you're not working with people. So we need to try to find a way to regain some of those informal, casual conversations and information sharing that we often miss. A couple other thoughts here. Neil talks about repositioning your products and services. Don't be afraid to change what you do. Okay, don't be afraid to change what you do. This new normal is going to require new ideas. And if you are trying to go back to the way you used to do business just because it's the way you used to do business, that's probably not going to work for you. Okay. Ed suggests clearing out all the 2019 and 2020 annual leaves. I think that's a good way to help, with your workforce. Keep people on, but help them, have them use their leaves before you go to unpaid leave. Certainly clear out all that leave from 2019 and 2020. I think people would rather do that than lose their jobs. So take a look at that option. Oliver asks a question. Says, what did your Baghdad experience teach you about resiliency? I'll tell you, one of the things it taught me was that, at least personally, that I can put up with getting shot at every single day and still be fine. So it's amazing what that's done for my ability to control stress and manage stress these days. But what I would say too is that the resilience of the Iraqi people just absolutely amazed me and still does to this day. They put up with conditions that you cannot imagine. And they're still trying, and they're still working hard to build a better country. So my hat's off to them. And so when I look at our current situation where I have to stay at home in an air-conditioned condo and I can have meals delivered to me and I can go out for a run if I want to, and I think about what those folks have put up with for decades, I realize, yeah, I can handle this. Yeah. And Mr. Chu asking one last question there before we sign off. Is it wise to change industries now? This may be the time to do that because industries are going through some changes. Companies are going through some changes, and they may be looking for different skill sets. So if you have been successful in one industry, but you're thinking about changing to another, do give that some thought. This could be a good time. And remember, companies are looking not just at specific skill sets, but they're looking for your fit. They're looking for your fit and how well you fit into the organization. So it's not just about your hard skills, it's about your soft skills too. So this could be a good opportunity to change industries. Companies are going to pivot. They're going through changes. So they're going to be looking for new kinds of people and new kinds of thinking, and you can bring that to them. So yeah, I say go for it. I say go for it. Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we've gone a couple minutes over my expected time. Thank you for sticking around with me. So I do want to say again, thanks so much. We've been doing these sessions every month since February. We'll be doing the next one in June. You'll be getting an email about that. In our feedback survey that we're sending to you, we are going to ask you about any topics you would like to see. Remember, get inputs from other people. Don't just take them from yourself. But we're very curious to see what is on your minds and what you might like to talk about. So again, thanks so much, everybody. Really enjoyed having you here today. Really enjoyed all the inputs and all the ideas that you shared and the questions that you brought up. They're very important. Good luck to all of you. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions or if there's anything we can do to help you out as you recover from this crisis. Thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.